Amina Okoro never imagined that her life could change in a single day. She had always believed that no matter how difficult life became, her parents, Chuma and Salima Okoro, would always be there for her. They were not just her parents, they were her closest friends, her guides, and the people who made every problem feel smaller. But one terrible afternoon, everything was taken away. The news came like a nightmare that refused to end. Chuma and Salima had been involved in a tragic accident while traveling near Zuri Falls. Despite every effort to save them, both of them lost their lives. When Amina heard the words, it felt as if the ground disappeared beneath her feet. She could not believe it. She kept hoping someone would tell her it was all a mistake. The days that followed were filled with tears, pain, and endless sadness. Friends and relatives came to offer condolences, but nothing could ease the emptiness in Amina's heart. Every corner of the family home reminded her of her parents. Their laughter was gone. Their voices were silent. The house that once felt warm and full of love suddenly felt cold and lonely. While Amina was still struggling to accept her loss, her older brother, Tendai Okoro, began acting differently. Almost immediately, he started making decisions for everyone. He spoke as if he was now in complete control of the family. At first, Amina didn't think much of it. She believed he was simply trying to stay strong during a difficult time. Amina trusted her brother. After all, they had both lost the same parents. She believed they would support each other and face their grief together. She thought their family bond would become stronger after such a terrible tragedy. But as she watched Tendai closely, something felt wrong. His concern didn't seem to be about the family. His attention seemed focused on something else entirely. Amina ignored the feeling and told herself she was imagining things. The last thing she expected was betrayal from her own brother. As she stood beside her parents' graves, tears running down her face, Amina silently promised to honor their memory. She had no idea that this heartbreaking loss was only the beginning of a much bigger storm. The people she trusted most were about to change her life forever. Only a few days had passed since Chuma and Salima Okoro were buried, but for Amina, every moment still felt unreal. She woke up each morning, hoping it had all been a bad dream. The pain of losing both parents was still fresh, and some days she could barely stop herself from crying. The family home in Zuri Falls felt empty without them. Every room carried memories of happier times. One afternoon, while Amina was sitting quietly in the living room looking through old family photos, Tendai walked in with a cold expression on his face. He didn't look sad. He didn't look emotional. Instead, he looked serious, almost impatient. "Amina, we need to talk," he said. Amina put down the photo album and looked at him. "What is it?" Tendai crossed his arms. "You need to start packing your things." At first, Amina thought she had misunderstood him. "Packing my things? Why?" "Because you can't stay here anymore," Tendai replied flatly. "This house belongs to me now." Amina stared at him in shock. "What are you talking about? This is our family home." Tendai shook his head. "No, I'm the oldest. I'm in charge now. There isn't room for both of us. You need to leave." The words hit Amina harder than anything she had heard since her parents died. She felt her heart sink into her chest. "Tendai, we just buried Mom and Dad. Where am I supposed to go?" He shrugged as if it wasn't his problem. "I don't know. Stay with a friend. Rent a room. Figure it out." Tears filled Amina's eyes. She could not believe her own brother was speaking to her this way. Just days ago, they had stood together at their parents' graves. She thought they were grieving together. She thought they were family. "Please," she said softly. "I need time. I have nowhere to go." But Tendai showed no sympathy. "You have until tomorrow morning," he said before walking away. That night, Amina barely slept. She sat on her bed, surrounded by childhood memories. The walls were covered with photos from birthdays, school graduations, and family celebrations. Every item in the room reminded her of her parents. The thought of leaving broke her heart. The next morning, Tendai returned and found her still sitting there. "I told you to pack," he said. Amina realized he wasn't joking. He truly wanted her gone. With tears streaming down her face, she slowly packed a few clothes, family photographs, and the small belongings she could carry. Every item she placed in her bag felt like another piece of her life being taken away. When she finally stepped outside, she turned back and looked at the house one last time. It was the only home she had ever known. It was where she learned to walk, where her parents had comforted her when she was sick and where countless happy memories had been made. Now she was being forced to leave it behind. As the front door closed behind her, Amina felt completely alone. Her parents were gone. Her brother had abandoned her. And with only a small bag in her hands, she walked away from the home she loved, not knowing where she would sleep that night or what her future would look like. What hurt the most was not losing the house. It was realizing that the person she trusted most after her parents' death had become the one who caused her the deepest pain. After being forced out of her family home, Amina felt lost and broken. She spent the first few days staying with a friend from school, hoping things would calm down and her brother would realize how cruel he had been. Deep inside, she still believed that family would eventually stand by her. She never imagined that things were about to get even worse. Instead of feeling guilty, Tendai began telling relatives his own version of the story. Whenever family members asked about Amina, he acted like the victim. "I had no choice," he would say. "Amina only cares about money. Ever since our parents died, all she talks about is what she can get from the family." The lies kept growing. Tendai told people that Amina had become selfish and demanding. He claimed she constantly argued with him and wanted control of everything their parents had left behind. None of it was true. Amina had never asked for money. She had been too busy grieving the loss of her parents. But because Tendai sounded confident, many relatives believed him without ever asking Amina for her side of the story. Soon, phone calls stopped coming. Family members who once welcomed her warmly began treating her differently. Some ignored her messages completely. Others gave her cold responses whenever she reached out. One day, Amina gathered enough courage to visit her aunt, a woman who had always been close to her mother. She hoped to find comfort and support. But the moment she arrived, she could feel something was wrong. Her aunt barely smiled. "I heard you've been causing problems for Tendai," she said. Amina felt her heart drop. "What? That's not true." Her aunt sighed. "Tendai told us everything. You should stop fighting over money. Your parents just passed away." Tears filled Amina's eyes. "I'm not fighting anyone," she said. "I just want my family." But her aunt didn't seem convinced. For the first time, Amina realized how badly her brother had poisoned everyone against her. As the weeks passed, more relatives turned their backs on her. Some refused to answer her calls. Others treated her like she was a burden. The same people who had hugged her at the funeral now acted as if she didn't belong in the family anymore. Every rejection hurt. At night, Amina often cried herself to sleep. She missed her parents terribly. More than once, she wished she could hear her mother's voice telling her everything would be okay. She wished her father could walk through the door and protect her from all the pain, but they were gone. Eventually, Amina understood that waiting for help was only making her suffer more. If nobody was willing to stand beside her, she would have to stand on her own. With very little money left, she made a difficult decision. She left Surrey Falls and moved to the busy city of Makuri, hoping for a fresh start. The city was unfamiliar and intimidating. The streets were crowded, the buildings seemed endless, and she knew almost no one there. Yet, despite her fear, she refused to give up. Carrying only a small suitcase and a heart full of pain, Amina stepped into her new life alone. She had lost her parents, she had lost her home, she had lost the support of her family, but she had not lost her strength. And although she didn't know it yet, the people who had abandoned her would one day regret believing the lies of the brother who betrayed her. Moving to Makuri was one of the hardest things Amina had ever done. She arrived with only a small suitcase, a few family photographs, and the little money she had left. Everything else had been taken from her. The city was loud, busy, and unfamiliar. Every day she saw people rushing through the streets, focused on their own lives. She felt completely alone. For the first few days, Amina stayed in a tiny rented room that barely had enough space for a bed and a small table. The walls were old, and the room felt nothing like the warm family home she had grown up in. Some nights, she sat on the edge of her bed and cried quietly, staring at photos of her parents. She missed them more than words could describe. Money was running out quickly, so Amina knew she had to find work. She spent days walking around Makuri, asking shops and businesses if they needed help. Many places turned her away. Some weren't hiring. Others wanted experience she didn't have. Just when she was starting to lose hope, a small bakery owner offered her a job. The pay was low, but Amina accepted immediately. Every morning, She woke up before sunrise and walked to the bakery while most of the city was still asleep. She spent long hours cleaning tables, serving customers, washing dishes, and helping prepare bread and pastry. By the end of each day, her feet ached and her hands were sore. The work was exhausting, but Amina never complained. She knew she had no one else to depend on. Many times, customers saw her smiling politely, but they had no idea how much pain she was carrying inside. While she worked, memories of her parents often filled her mind. Sometimes a customer would remind her of her father. Sometimes the smell of fresh bread reminded her of mornings spent with her mother. Those memories made her smile and cry at the same time. The hardest part wasn't the physical work. It was the emotional pain left by her brother's betrayal. Almost every night, she asked herself the same question. How could Tendai do this to me? She had loved and trusted him her entire life. Even after their parents died, she believed they would support each other. Instead, he had thrown her out of their home and turned the family against her. That wound hurt more than losing money or property. But little by little, something began to change. Instead of allowing her pain to destroy her, Amina used it as motivation. She worked harder. She saved every extra coin she earned. She learned new skills at the bakery and gained the respect of her employer and co-workers. People started noticing her kindness and strong work ethic. Even on difficult days, she treated others with respect and never gave up. Weeks turned into months. Life was still far from perfect, but for the first time since her parents' death, Amina felt a small spark of hope. She was beginning to build something for herself. She still carried the scars of everything she had lost. The grief, the loneliness, and the betrayal had not disappeared. But she was no longer the broken girl who had walked out of her family home with tears in her eyes. Step by step, day by day, Amina was creating a new life from nothing. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. The people who thought she would fail had badly underestimated her strength. Several weeks passed, and Amina slowly settled into her new routine in Makuri. Life was still difficult, but she kept moving forward. Every day, she worked long hours at the bakery, returned to her small room, and tried her best to stay strong. Although the pain of losing her parents never left her, she had learned how to hide it behind a quiet smile. One afternoon, as she was finishing her shift, her phone rang unexpectedly. The number looked unfamiliar. "Hello," Amina answered. The caller introduced himself as a lawyer representing the state of Chuma and Silima Okoro. Amina froze. The lawyer explained that there would be an official reading of her parents in a few days. All immediate family members had been asked to attend. For a moment, Amina didn't know what to say. Her parents had never talked about a will. In fact, she had no idea one even existed. After ending the call, she sat quietly for several minutes. Memories of her parents filled her mind. Just hearing their names, spoken by the lawyer, brought tears to her eyes. Meanwhile, back in Zuri Falls, Tendai received the same notice. The moment he heard about the will reading, excitement filled him. In his mind, the outcome was already decided. The family home was his. The properties were his. The business was his. Everything belonged to him. At least that's what he believed. For days, he bragged to relatives about what he expected to receive. "My parents trusted me the most," he told them confidently. "I handled family matters after they died. Of course, everything will come to me." Many relatives agreed with him. Some even started discussing how successful Tendai would become once he officially inherited the family assets. Nobody seemed to think about Amina. As usual, she was ignored. When the day of the will reading finally arrived, relatives gathered at the lawyer's office. The room buzzed with conversations and speculation. Tendai arrived, dressed confidently, smiling as he greeted people. He looked more excited than emotional. To him, the meeting felt less like a family matter and more like a celebration. Amina arrived quietly a few minutes later. She wore simple clothes and sat alone near the back of the room. Several relatives noticed her, but offered only brief greetings. Some didn't acknowledge her at all. Amina didn't care. She hadn't come expecting money or property. The truth was, she almost didn't want to attend. The thought of hearing her parents' names again brought back painful memories, but she felt she owed it to them to be there. As she sat silently, she looked around the room. Tendai was laughing and talking confidently with relatives. Everyone seemed certain they already knew what the will would say. But Amina noticed something strange. The lawyer remained unusually serious. Several sealed documents sat neatly on the table in front of him. Whatever was written inside seemed important. Amina took a deep breath and folded her hands in her lap. She expected nothing from the meeting. She only wanted to hear her parents' final wishes. What she didn't know was that Chuma and Silima had been keeping a secret for years. A secret that was about to change everything and leave everyone in that room completely shocked. The room was completely silent as the lawyer adjusted his glasses and opened the sealed envelope. Amina sat at the back, her hands tightly folded in her lap. Her heart was calm but heavy. She wasn't expecting anything. She was only there to hear what her parents had left behind, even if it hurt. Tendai, however, sat straight in his chair with full confidence. He kept smiling slightly, as if he already knew the result. He leaned back and whispered small comments to relatives beside him, acting relaxed and powerful. In his mind, there was no doubt at all. Everything would come to him. The house, the land, the business, everything. The lawyer cleared his throat. The silence in the room grew deeper. This is the last will and testament of Chuma Okoro and Silima Okoro, he began. Amina's breath caught for a moment when she heard her parents' names. Her eyes lowered, and she silently prepared herself for whatever was coming. The lawyer continued reading, explaining that Chuma and Silima had left very clear instruction. Every asset, every property, every account had been carefully listed and documented. Nothing was left unclear or random. It was obvious they had planned everything very carefully before their death. As the reading continued, Tendai's expression slowly began to change. At first, he was still confident, nodding slightly as if confirming his own expectation. But then the lawyer mentioned something that made him pause. Certain properties were not going to him. His smile faded a little. The lawyer kept reading calmly, explaining how the family home, along with several important assets, had been assigned according to responsibility, trust, and past behavior. The words were not emotional, but they carried heavy meaning. Tendai's hands slowly stopped moving. For the first time, he leaned forward. Amina looked up slightly, still not fully understanding what was happening. She felt her chest tighten, but she stayed quiet. Then came the next part. The lawyer clearly stated that a major portion of the estate had been left to Amina Okoro. For a moment, the room did not react. It was as if everyone needed time to understand what they had just heard. Tendai blinked, once, then again. "No," he whispered under his breath. The lawyer continued reading, explaining that Chuma and Silima had observed everything over the years. They had seen kindness, patience, and sacrifice. They had also seen selfishness and disrespect. Their decision was not emotional. It was intentional and carefully planned. Tendai's confidence completely broke. His face turned pale. His fingers tightened on the armrest of his chair as reality slowly sank in. Amina sat frozen, unable to move. She had not expected anything, but now she was hearing her name again and again in a way she could not understand. The room that once felt full of certainty now felt completely unstable. And for the first time, Tendai realized something terrifying. The life he had been planning might not belong to him at all. The lawyer took a slow breath and continued reading, and the entire room felt like it had stopped moving. No one was speaking now. Even Tendai, who had been so confident just moments ago, was sitting completely still, as if he was trying to convince himself that he had heard wrong. Then the lawyer said the words that changed everything. The family home, all major properties, and the majority share of the family business are hereby left to Amina Okoro. For a second, there was complete silence. It didn't feel real to anyone in the room. Some relatives looked at each other in confusion. Others looked down at the floor, trying to process what they had just heard. Amina's eyes widened. She didn't move. She didn't even blink for a moment. It felt like her mind had stopped working. She kept thinking there must be a mistake. Her parents had left everything to her? That didn't make sense to her at all. Tendai, on the other hand, slowly turned his head toward the lawyer. His voice came out weak. "What did you say?" The lawyer repeated it calmly, word by word, without emotion. The house, the properties, and most of the business were legally given to him. Everything had been properly signed and witnessed. Tendai's face changed instantly. The confidence he had walked in completely disappeared. His breathing became heavier. His hands, which were once relaxed, now gripped the chair tightly. "No, this can't be right," he said loudly. I am the eldest son. I handled everything after their death. But the lawyer didn't react. He simply continued reading the explanation written by Chuma. The parents had made their decision very carefully. They had observed their children for years, watching how each of them behaved in difficult situations. They had seen who showed kindness without expecting anything in return. And they had also seen who acted selfishly, even when the family needed unity the most. Their words were clear. Amina had shown patience, respect, and responsibility even in hard times. She had cared for her parents without complaint and always put family first. Because of this, they trusted her to protect everything they had built. But Tendai's name came with conditions. He was only given a small portion of the inheritance. The letter explained that his past behavior, his selfish decisions, and his lack of respect for family values had been noticed long before their death. His share was limited because trust had already been broken. The room felt heavier with every sentence. Tendai sat frozen, staring at the papers as if they might change if he looked long enough. But nothing changed. Amina finally lowered her head, tears slowly forming in her eyes, not because of the money, but because she was realizing something deeper. Her parents had seen everything, even the things she thought no one noticed. And now, their final truth had been revealed to everyone. The room stayed silent for a few seconds after the lawyer finished speaking. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like no one knows what to say next. Amina still sat in her chair, trying to understand what had just happened, while Tendai looked like the ground had been pulled from under his. Then the whispers started. Relatives who had once mocked Amina, ignored her, and believed every lie about her now, looked completely shocked. Some were staring at the lawyer. Others were looking at Amina with confusion, as if seeing her for the first time. The same people who had called her selfish were now realizing they had been wrong. Tendai suddenly stood up. "This is not possible," he said loudly. "There must be a mistake. My parents would never do this." His voice was shaking now, nothing like the confident tone he had used before. He stepped closer to the lawyer's desk, pointing at the documents. "Check again. You are reading it wrong." The lawyer remained calm. He pushed his glasses up slowly and replied in a firm voice. "There is no mistake. These documents are legally signed and witnessed. They were prepared by your parents while they were alive and fully aware." Tendai shook his head, refusing to accept it. No, this is wrong. I am the son. I took care of everything after they died." But the lawyer opened another file and showed him the official stamps, signatures, and legal approval. Everything was real. Everything was final. At that moment, something inside Tendai began to break. He looked around the room, expecting someone to support him, but no one spoke. The relatives who used to agree with him now looked uncomfortable and silent. Nobody was on his side anymore. For the first time, Tendai realized something terrifying. He had no control anymore. The house he threw Amina out of was not his. The power he thought he had was gone. And the respect he once enjoyed was disappearing in front of his eyes. He slowly sat back down, his hands trembling. His face looked pale, almost empty. The confident brother who had ordered Amina out of the house just days ago was no longer there. In his place was someone who could not believe what was happening. Amina stayed quiet, but her heart was racing. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just watched everything unfold, still trying to process how life had changed so suddenly. The same relatives who had turned their backs on her now couldn't even look her in the eye. And in that moment, it felt like something bigger than justice had arrived. It felt like karma had walked into the room and had come instantly. After the will reading, everything in Tendai's life began to fall apart, slowly but clearly. He left the lawyer's office in silence, but the damage had already been done. The confident man who once believed he owned everything was now walking out with nothing but shock and shame. At first, he tried to fight it. He called relatives, trying to explain his side again and again. But nobody was listening the way they used to. The same people who once praised him now spoke to him differently. Some avoided his calls. Others answered politely but distantly, as if they no longer trusted his words. Tendai could feel it everywhere he went. Respect was disappearing. Support was fading. And slowly, even his closest friends started pulling away. People began asking questions about how he treated Amina. Small details came out, how he had thrown her out, how he had spoken about her, how he had turned the family against her. Now those actions were coming back to him like a mirror, showing everything he had tried to hide. For the first time, Tendai felt alone in a way he had never experienced before. Meanwhile, Amina's life was also changing, but in a completely different direction. She did not rush into anything. She did not show anger or revenge. Instead, she handled everything with calmness and maturity. When the lawyer explained the next steps, she listened carefully. When property documents were handed over, she accepted them quietly, as if she still could not fully believe they belonged to her. Even though she now had control of the family home and business, Amina did not behave like someone who wanted power. She asked questions. She took advice. She treated workers and staff with kindness and respect. Slowly, people began noticing something different about her. She was not like what Tendai had described. She was gentle, responsible, and thoughtful. In every decision she made, she showed that her parents had chosen wisely. She didn't waste time celebrating or showing off. Instead, she focused on understanding everything her parents had left behind and how she could protect it. Some relatives who had once ignored her began to look at her differently. They saw her calm behavior, her patience, and the way she carried herself even after so much pain. Slowly, a new kind of respect began to grow around her. At the same time, Tendai kept losing more and more ground. His voice no longer carried weight in the family. His anger no longer scared anyone. The power he once believed was his had completely shifted. And the hardest truth he had to face was this. The sister he tried to push away was now the one holding everything together. And the brother who wanted everything was slowly left with nothing but regret. Amina stood quietly inside the same house she had once been forced to leave. Everything looked familiar, but nothing felt the same anymore. The walls, the furniture, the rooms filled with memories of her childhood, all of it now belonged to her. But instead of feeling proud or powerful, she felt something deeper and more emotional. She walked slowly through the house, touching small things as she passed by. The living room where she used to sit with her parents. The kitchen where her mother used to cook and laugh. The doorway where her father would greet her after a long day. Every corner carried a memory that now felt both painful and beautiful at the same time. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not wipe them away. She thought about everything that had happened. Losing her parents, being thrown out by her own brother, being hated by her own family, sleeping alone in a small room in Makuri, working long hours just to survive. Every moment came back to her like waves. But now, standing in this house again, she understood something important. Her parents had seen everything before they left this world. They had seen her pain, they had seen her strength, and they had also seen who truly deserved to carry their legacy forward. Their final gift was not just money or property, it was justice. Amina was not the daughter who was forgotten. She was the one who was chosen. Outside the house, life had changed too. Tendai was no longer the confident brother who controlled everything. He was left with regret, silence, and the heavy weight of his own action. He had lost respect, trust, and the family bond he had taken for granted. And now he had to live with the truth could never undo what he had done. Amina stood near the window and looked outside. The sun was setting over Zuri Falls, painting the sky in warm colors. For the first time in a long while, she felt peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because she had survived everything that was meant to break her. And in the end, the daughter who was discarded became the true guardian of her family's name, while her brother learned a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life.